But you mentioned Cori Bush. There's one other person who also helped lead the charge for these riots. And I want to bring this up because I have a question about this. That person obviously was Kamala Harris.
Yes.
She tweeted out the link to donate to rioters who, I mean, some of these people, I'm not going to list their crimes, but there's some very serious crimes some of these rioters had committed. And she just blanket says, we're going to raise money to bail them out. She said, the Texas House Democrats protest, that's what she calls it, a protest, shows extraordinary courage. So for those that are just tuning in, this is basically the Democrats in Texas are illegally blocking a vote by fleeing the state in private jets to where D.C., I think, right?
Yeah.
And Kamala Harris, I wonder if there's like is it illegal to encourage someone to commit a crime? Is it, am I going too far by her saying it's just courage? Did she actually encourage them to do it?
Well, we call that being an accessory. and people go to jail for being an accessory. But remember that the Texas Democrats, they did that in the final days of our regular session at the end of May. And they took a trip up here to Washington, D.C. They were met by the vice president, and she called them courageous and all of these things. So this has already been in the books. This was cooked up. We went into a special session last week, Thursday, and for whatever reason, our Speaker of the House down there in Texas put the House on recess, and next thing you know, they're on recess. They're up here playing around in Washington, D.C.
I feel like when you get to the point where the political parties are engaging in voting instead of policy, so the goal of the Democrats now is to affect how the vote happens. Yeah, that's like the last barrier to the system falling apart. Because it's one thing when you have everyone saying, okay, we agree these are the rules, now let's play the game.
Yeah.
Now you're at the point where you're in the fourth quarter, and the other coach is saying, we're going to change the rules. That rule doesn't count. We got to change everybody come here. We're changing the rules. We all agree. It's like, no, something's up. If they can't defend themselves on policy, and they're now saying we need to change the voting rules, that sounds like they've got an argument to make.
That sounds like how you lose a country. And when you allow them to take such petulant actions, let's just put it this way. If Republicans were to do this exact same thing, what would be the number one story on LSD, CNN, NBC? What would be the number one story?
It is the story. Republican voter suppression across the country.
Yeah, but that's how they flip it.
Right.
Just the same as when Jen Psaki comes out and says Republicans want to defund the police. These guys,
that was a good one.
Yeah, but these guys are masterful in how they can manipulate language. I mean, all of a sudden they have redefined what infrastructure is.
Yeah.
And so what we've got to do, we've got to get better with that. We've got to have that little strategic, cell that sits down and thinks about where they're going to go and how do we block it.
We got to talk about freedom. The word, the definition, what does it mean? Because
it's an anti-government slogan.
It has apparently now, screaming freedom in Cuba is anti-government.
It is.
But so we got to define freedom. What is freedom? I don't have the freedom to go next door and rip food out of the guy's refrigerator. I don't have the freedom to throw you guys against the wall. I don't have freedom in that sense. We have created restrictions for a society in which we gain certain types of freedom. And so voter restriction in a lot of ways enhances freedom because it creates a restrictive system that works better than just a throw it against the wall and see what sticks type of anarchy freedom where
let's put it this way to help clarify your point. If you had an electrical current go into water, those electrons are just free to mill about.
Yes.
You're not going to solve any equations with it. But if you restrict the flow of those electrons, you can solve complex equations. Computers can restrict the flow, they restrict. And so I think about this voting stuff, and restriction is a false framing. They're trying to make it seem like Republicans are trying to take away people's rights, when in actuality, it's about securing the process, which guarantees your rights so that someone can't come in and steal it. For every unmatched signature, for every ballot that should have been rejected because it was late or whatever, that comes in, that negates your due diligence, the hard work you did to abide by the rules.
Absolutely. But the thing is that let's put it in a historical context if we want to talk about voting. Who has always been the party that was against voting rights? Who has always been the party that was about voting suppression? Okay, if I remember right, the 14th Amendment, that was Republicans, and that was to give blacks recently freed slaves, which was the reason why the Republican Party was founded. 13th Amendment, which the Democrats voted against. They also voted against the 14th Amendment. They've taken that equal protection under the law clause and they perverted it. The Democrats were the ones that came up with Jim Crow. So I really do find it kind of laughable when, everyone's saying Jim Crow 2.0. Well, you guys should know about Jim Crow because you started it. Or you talk about the literacy test and the poll tax Texas. When you talk about the Ku Klux Klan, why was the Ku Klux Klan founded? The Ku Klux Klan was founded for voter suppression, to keep blacks from being able to go out and vote. The same type of blacks that founded the Republican Party of Texas, and those gentlemen who became some early pioneers. And so that's what we have to start doing, is saying that, you guys have always been on the side of this historically. When you want to talk about systemic racism, it's you guys.
Oh, they would know. I love that. Yeah. I love how they push the parties switched line. It's amazing to me that you have people who don't read the news, don't read history.
They read headlines.
They read headlines. I know a lot of people from Chicago. People I've known my whole life, and they tweet things like, "I'll be talking to them, and they'll say, yeah, well, the party switched." And I go, when? Well, it was like like a couple decades ago, like the Republicans decided to be Democrats, and I was like, why?
You know what? Yeah.
Oh, no. They don't have an answer. I mean, certainly there are people who have come up with answers, but it's remarkable to me that by simply telling someone this, they go, got it. And they have no idea what it means. Mm-hmm. They have no idea about the history or the arguments. They just go along with it. And that's what they throw at you when you try to point that out.
Robert Byrd, you say you're close to West Virginia. Robert Byrd, senator from West Virginia, was always a Democrat. He was also a grand wizard in the Ku Klux Klan. Uh-huh. And he's the exact same guy who eulogized him at his funeral? Joe Biden.
Yep.
And there's the same Joe Biden who referred to black men as predators. Now, when Joe Biden's standing there in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and he's talking about the riots that were there and the murdering of blacks and the destruction of Black Wall Street, he kind of missed this little great historical anecdote that it was the Democrats who did that. Or when you tried to take, Juneteenth, which was the day that blacks found out that they were free down in Texas in 1865, and he tries to say that this is an Independence Day. Well, they found out that they were free because of a Republican president and Republicans and what they did, and the Emancipation Proclamation that was signed by Abraham Lincoln, not because of Democrats. And so they're trying to steal history, and you're right. They just put out the soundbite. And so, yes, the party switch. And people just say, okay. And the more you say that, people start to believe it. But when you anecdotally think about this, Tim, the longest filibuster in U.S. Senate history. Senate Democrats against the 1964 Civil Rights Act.
And they say that was around the time the Democrats started switching. But I'd like to play just a little historical game of walking through a brief time through history, starting with what you just said. Democrats filibustering civil rights. Okay. From then, where was it where we were having these police brutality problems? And still to this day, the left says there are police brutality problems. Well, it's New York, it's L.A., it's Chicago. Who runs those cities?
Yeah.
They're not run by Republicans. You look at redlining and blockbusting. Where were those policies implemented? Why, that was Chicago. I'm sorry, I thought Chicago's been Democrat since, the 20s?
The greatest amount of failure is in all of these Democrat cities. The greatest amount of crime, even though they try to say Republicans defund the police, the greatest amount of black-on-black killing is in cities that are run by Democrats. But yet I have yet to see, Ms. Patrice Cullors of, Black Lives Matter, the avowed Marxist that has 3 multi-million-dollar properties. I barely have a house, like $450,000. But yet I've never seen her go to Chicago, Detroit, Atlanta, D.C., Philadelphia, or any of these places.
I got to correct you though. I think actually she has 5 houses.
Oh,
but they're not.
Shame on me.
But they're only like $500,000 each, and one of them's over $1 million. I could be wrong though. I think it's 5.
Okay. Well, I know there's 3 that I thought 3 were multi-million. Maybe the other 2 kind of bring the value down.
I think what happened was people reported she had a multi-million-dollar house empire.
Okay.
But I'm pretty sure a lot of them were like $500,000.
But I thought Marxists were all about wealth redistribution and
you thought, right?
Spread. How many people live in that house? I mean, shouldn't she have whole families living in the house with her? It's do as I say, not as I do.
We there was a story a while ago. We looked up the data. Washington Post ran the data. The crime per capita and the crime by population. And the funny thing is, when you look at crime by general population, it's like number 1 is New York. But sure, it's not really fair to look at the top 10 cities and say who has the most crime. Aha, New York. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, New York's got a massive population. We need to look at per capita. And the funny thing is, per capita, you actually have to remove some Republican cities, or at the time Republican mayors, because it's all Democrats. And so the left's response to this is, well, Democrats tend to run bigger cities. And I'm like, that doesn't mean anything.
No.
Why do they tend to run bigger cities? I don't know, but I'll tell you this. If I can grow up in Chicago and you've got Democrats running it for generations and they've not solved these problems of racism and blockbusting and redlining and segregation, When will you be like, we need to stop voting for these people?
Because remember the movie Shawshank Redemption?
Oh yeah, great movie.
Remember when Brooks, he had been there in the institution for so long, then finally he got to be free. But when they let him out of the institution, he was working at the grocery store. He just could not deal with it because he had become an institutional man.
Yeah.
And so I think that you have gotten this institutional mentality of victimhood, that there are some people that have become so comfortable with Section 8 housing, so comfortable with the drugs and the gangs, so comfortable with waiting for the check to come down. You start to look at a lot of the fast food restaurants and places like that. They're suffering because people are getting paid to stay at home and not work. I think that we have this dependency cycle that is happening. And when you read Alexander Fraser Tytler's, his, Democracy Cannot Exist as a Permanent Form of Government, you read that cycle. The cycle starts with dependence, but then as you go through it, you end up coming right back to dependence. And I think that is what is happening. And one of the critical points is that you get that apathy. And that's what we see happening here in the United States of America, where people are just comfortable. They're complacent in being a victim. And that's what yesterday I opened up CPAC on Sunday. And I said, we got this choice to either be victors or be victims. And what conservatism, what America was founded on, was the individual is a victor.
One thing I think makes everything a bit easier is now that the Democrats have started admitting they're all racists and white supremacists. So you have people like Robin DiAngelo, and you get these TikTok videos where these are all progressive, ultra woke people flat out saying they're racists and white supremacists. And I'm like, thank you for admitting it. We've long suspected it. But I think, as many people have pointed out, it's like the soft bigotry of low expectations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or I think it's as Carl Benjamin calls it, white supremacists with guilty consciences.
Well, Shelby Steele wrote the book White Guilt. And all you folks out there, if you haven't read Shelby Steele's book White Guilt, you should read it. And that's how, I got to tell you, white folks get hoodwinked. Y'all getting hoodwinked, man. I mean, someone comes up to you and says you're a white supremacist racist, you just say, yeah, get out of here. I mean, stop this. Please don't call me that. I'll do whatever you want. Here's I'm a corporate CEO. Here's $10 million. Black Lives Matter. Don't talk to me like that.
Well, they don't want to break through their window. They don't want to fire.
Well, you know what? That's why we had a Second Amendment. You throw a brick through my window, something's going to happen.
Also, we had Yeonmi Park on the show. She's a North Korean. She escaped North Korea, basically.
Was that the one that talked at the school board meeting here?
Ooh, no, that was Asra.
Okay.
Well, I don't know if she talked here, but she's the one fighting at schools.
Yeah.
Yeonmi was a North Korean defector.
And she was saying how freedom is terrifying, hard, and scary, and she almost went back to North Korea when she had finally received freedom for the first time, because she didn't know what to make. She didn't want to make the wrong decision, and she was so used to being told what to do. So I think these people that are institutionalized have a similar life experience where, the opportunity of freedom is you could destroy it all.
You got to grab it yourself.
They will vote to maintain those institutions.
Yes.
And the Democrats, I think, are trying to not necessarily, I don't think it's as overt, but I think it's a pressure. They're applying a certain pressure so that in a long enough amount of time, they will generate more institutionalized voters. So I think what's interesting is there's long been this trope that Democrats want Hispanic voters. And they're going to bring in illegal immigrants because they want to give them, they're going to give them a path to citizenship. The interesting thing is that when you see in South Texas how the Hispanic areas actually voted Republican. And
I know.
And in Miami,
we've done an incredible job of flipping the Rio Grande Valley. For the first time in 36 years, we have a Republican mayor down in the Rio Grande Valley. We have a 19-year-old city council member, Roman Garcia, in Kerrville, Texas. But you just brought up a great point. And this, I'm not really smart. The Army teaches you to carry 3x5 cars with all your notes.
That is
smart. Back to. But I want to share this quote with you all and with the audience. The uncontested absurdities of today are the accepted slogans of tomorrow. They come to be accepted by degrees by dint of constant pressure on one side and constant retreat on the other, until one day when they are suddenly declared to be the country's official ideology. Ayn Rand.
It's brilliant. It is brilliant because I tweeted about this today. There's a video that I saw. Cassandra Fairbanks tweeted in response to some video. It was one of the most absurd things I've ever seen. A guy takes a coffee maker and he pours
I saw that.
He pours lemonade in the back. He puts broccoli where the coffee's supposed to go, and he puts a salmon fillet in the coffee pitcher or whatever. And then he turns it on. He says, "This is totally legit. The lemonade will steam the broccoli and then cook the salmon in 7 minutes." The video is absurd. Absolutely absurd. There's other videos where a woman is pouring nachos all over her counter, and it's a disgusting mess. She does the same thing with spaghetti. There's videos where people throw burgers and fries in a blender and then freeze it and make patties out of it. It is nonsense content meant to shock people to get shares. You see the guy pouring lemonade on salmon in a coffee maker, and he says, Sunny D. And you're like, that's disgusting. I need to show my friends how disgusting this is. Here's the problem. Little kids, they're going to see that, and they're not going to know that it's meant to manipulate you.
Yeah.
Because they're going to see a very serious-looking man very seriously saying, watch me cook salmon this way. They're going to grow up with that. And then when they're older, they're going to be taking a steam iron and ironing their Eggo waffle while filming themselves with an animal face filter. And it'll be pure insanity because we're older. We understand you don't cook. It's not convenient to cook salmon in a coffee maker. That's stupid.
Yeah.
But these kids don't know that. Now check this out. Here's where it gets a bit more damning. At the end of the 2000s, something most of you who listen to this show have heard quite a lot, but it plays into this, especially with that Ayn Rand quote. Blogs realized that rage was getting the most shares.
Yes.
So what they started doing was started saying racism, racism, sexism, racism. Then they realized combining them got them even more shares. Mm-hmm. You had kids who were 10 years old in 2008. They're not very politically active. They go on Facebook and they see nothing but police brutality, nothing but posts about evil racism of America. And they've been living in that their entire adult lives. Now it's no surprise they believe all this woke insanity. They believe all this psychotic garbage because it's been their entire life of people just posting manipulative content. So to go to that quote, those absurdities have become the slogans of these young people who are now in their 20s and voting in. I love it. We actually have some of these leftists sit here and tell us Joe Biden is the right path towards avoiding corruption. And I'm like, you don't know anything about the Obama administration at all, do you?
No.
The National Defense Authorization Act, indefinite detention provisions. How about Biden Inc. putting his brother in charge of Iraqi construction? All of a sudden the family's making millions of dollars. The Burisma deals, the investigations,
China.
they ignore all. China, flying on the plane. I mean, come on. I said this before, I'll say it again, and then we'll segue to what I wanted to talk about before I got derailed. If the Republicans win the House back, they should impeach Joe Biden on all of the evidence pertaining to...
But they won't do that, Tim.
Of course they won't.
They will not do that because they believe that we're gentlemanly, we're above that, because this is a dogfight. This is beyond a knife fight. And, I had a dear friend of mine, a Marine, retired first sergeant by the name of Jim Reifinger. And he said, if you ever find yourself in a fair fight, it's all because your tactics suck. And we continue to want to have this fair fight. We continue to want to. There's a great scene from Officer and a Gentleman when David Caruso is standing there in front of Louis Gossett Jr. and they're going to start doing the training on hand-to-hand combat. And he's going to use David Caruso, the cadet, as his example. And, David Caruso, well, this cadet knows by regulation, drill sergeant, you're not allowed to strike me or anything like really? And Lou Gossett puts him down into a chokehold.
Yeah.
And that's what Republicans are. Republicans stand there, and if you read Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals, you know what one of the rules are? To constrain your enemy into their own principles and values. And so that comes back to what is happening at the border. You have a federal government that has completely abdicated its constitutional duty to protect the sovereignty of the state of Texas and the United States of America. And we're sitting around talking about, well, we really can't do anything about it because we don't have the ability as a state. The Constitution says that you can protect yourself when the federal government abdicates their duty.
This is interesting because the way you're describing it, it sounds very much like the old trope of the Revolutionary War. The Crown was very much looking for a regimented battle on the on the standard front.
We didn't play that way. We didn't play, and it's fun. I was watching Last of the Mohicans. That's why I was loving. I was loving your little flintlock pistol, and you're right. I mean, we were the original guerrilla warriors here in North America.
We wanted to win.
We wanted to win.
Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to see the full show, come back to this channel, youtube.com/TimcastIRL, Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., where you can leave comments and super chat, and we actually will read your comments on the show. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and if you want exclusive members-only content, segments you can't get anywhere else, go to timcast.com, become a member, and we even have full bonus episodes. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.